With Marco Rossi headed to injured reserve and week to week, now would be a great time for Bill Guerin and John Hynes to figure out what they have as far as young players go on the roster.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
Hey, this is Marcus Foligno, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Seth Toupal. Welcome to Locked On Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network. Locked On Wild is your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. You can find us on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the course of the week. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Jessi Pierce of NHL.com and the Bar Down Beauties podcast joins us as we get caught up to speed on the last couple of weeks of the season since Jessi last joined the show. And we'll take a look at a couple of Bill Guerin quotes that caught my attention in Bill Guerin saying we don't know what we have with the young players, and also saying he's not afraid to make a big splash to shake up the roster. We will ask those direct questions to see if we think, number one, that Bill Guerin will make a big trade before the trade deadline to shake things up. And then we will discuss how the Minnesota Wild can try to figure out what they have with some of the young players on the roster. My name is Seth Toupal, credentialed media member and host of Locked On Wild, and had the chance to catch up with Jessi Pierce of the Bar Down Beauties podcast and NHL.com to get her thoughts on where the Minnesota Wild currently sit since we last caught up with her back at the start of the season. So we'll lead off with that interview, get some of Jessi's thoughts on what we've seen so far this year. We will then dive into those two big, meaty Bill Guerin quotes about potentially shaking up the roster. And also, we don't know what we have with the youth. So let's dive right in. Let's get some of Jessi Pierce's thoughts on the start of the season for the Minnesota Wild. All right, Wild fans, Jessi Pierce of the Bar Down Beauties podcast, which is now part of the Score North family of podcasts and covering the Minnesota Wild for NHL.com, joins the show once again. Jessi, we are 18 games into the season. And after a overtime loss to the San Jose Sharks, pretty much the whole week to just kind of take a look at where this team is at and assess what we've seen so far this year, and you having a bird's eye view to everything that has gone on with this team. 7-7-4. What have you seen? What do you pull away from the first 18 games of the season, or do you just take what we've seen the last couple of years, you just change a few names, change a few letters, and you just call it good?
That sounds about right. It's nothing's different, right? Like last year, the difference is they started out hot, but fell apart, and blame injuries, blame what you will. But we can't keep looking back on last season and comparing the season at 18 games in. They've shown us who they are. And unfortunately, I think who they are just isn't very good. I'm not saying they're bad. They're just not very good. You know what I mean? It's underwhelming, to say the least. Because you have Kirill Kaprizov. You have him coming off this massive contract signing, and not to like pull him out and say he's not doing enough, but the roster construction around him isn't enough. And we kind of knew that. And yes, the offseason didn't yield the signings that you wanted, but the guys underachieving now on the roster, it's hurting this team. I mean, you look at Anaheim, San Jose, Utah, Seattle, Chicago is in a playoff spot as of the moment we're recording this, right? So you're right now in a tough position in the West. The West is always hard, but now that these underbelly teams are coming to the top, you have no room for error. And unfortunately, 18 games in, it hasn't been too successful for Minnesota so far.
And it's largely the same things, like special teams being, up and down. I know the power play has been the main source of offense so far this year. 5-on-5 scoring is worse than it has been the last couple of years. And it just is a series of just these little things that happen during the games. Like a breakdown defensively where if it happens at any other point of the game, it's fine. But it happens at that exact moment and it leads to a goal, and then you don't have the 5-on-5 scoring to be able to offset that. But it's, we're in the same shoes, which is why I kind of wanted to go through a few quotes to tee up the rest of the episode today.
Yeah.
Michael Russo talked to Bill Guerin and John Hynes about the predicament between play the kids and continue to try to win. One of the quotes that stood out to me was Billy saying, "I'm not afraid to make a big shakeup with this roster." Jessi, what do you think the chances are we see a big shakeup with this roster at some point this season?
There's no reason not to. If you are truly in a win now mode situation, which you don't necessarily have to be, given that Kirill's locked up for 8 years. If Kirill had signed, a 3-year extension or what have you, I would understand that push, but also he's getting older. So it's kind of, adjusting that timeline too. Why not? This is the first time this year, I think I said this on the Buttes podcast, is I would be okay with trading a Joel Eriksson Ek, a Jonas Brodin, a Jared Spurgeon, names that usually in my mind are complete locks for and again, putting aside the no moves, no trades, the, what have you of their contracts, I'd be okay with it because there really are very fewer and fewer untouchables on the roster this year than there have been in years past. And you've seen it happen. You remember the core of Dumba, Granlund, Coyle, Zucker, they got moved at deadline, and it says a lot about where you think the team is at. But if you can get the return that you need to, Ryan Hartman, right? Like he's another guy that I think would be of great value. Marco Rossi, of course, is in that mix, but guys that I think people imagine are staples on the team, that's what would signal to me that, yep, Billy is trying to dial in on this year. And but again, it goes two ways. Are you selling? Are you a seller because you're selling on the season? Or are you selling because you truly want to get those huge pieces that are going to help Matt Boldy, that are going to help Zeev Buium even on the back end, or that are going to help Kirill to that next step? So I'd love to see it. I dare you, Billy. I dare you. I don't know that he'll do it. But that's the only way this team's going to get better. It's not going to come from within. It's not going to come from the guys, Vladimir Tarasenko all of a sudden finding his game again. Like it's going to come from a big trade like that.
I'm so glad you said that because that was the literal exact thought that popped into my head is go ahead and do it. I dare you.
Right? Like I would love to see it. I don't know that Billy has the gusto necessarily too, right? Because I think there sometimes seems to be a certain sense of safety for players on the Minnesota Wild roster where they think they're not worried about getting moved. They're not worried about getting traded because it doesn't happen unless you're a prospect or a pick. That's what's been moved in the past under Bill Guerin's tenure. So I think their guys feel safe sometimes and make the move then, Bill. Do it. Let's see what you can make happen.
The other one to finish up was a quote where Bill said, he said, "Look, we don't really know what we have as far as prospects go. We could have some high-end guys. We might have a Duncan Keith in the system. You never know. He played 2 years in the AHL, and look at how he turned out. We don't know what we have, and I cannot scream it, yell it any louder. Villain era here on Locked On Wild. What a better reason to try to see what you have then if you don't know what you've got."
100%. So Liam Ohgren, let's take him as an example, right? Like I've had other people on, say, well, why are you so high on Liam Ohgren? I'm like, because I haven't seen him be bad. I haven't seen him be good. I don't know what he is because he's not given the opportunity. You know where Ben Jones is. You know where Tyler Pitlick is. They've had their opportunity in their career. They are AHL guys who are good to fill in when there's injuries on the fourth line. I don't need them getting more opportunity than Liam Ohgren, especially in the juncture of the year that you're at. We've been hearing about this first-round prospect in Ohgren. We've been hearing about all of the prospects and how great they are and how Minnesota Wild has them. We never see them. I am all for pacing development to an extent, right? Like Joel Eriksson Ek spent some time in Iowa. Matt Boldy did. Like I am all for it. But at some point, you got to play the kids. There's a reason Bedard, Celebrini, and Carlson are atop the points in the league because they're getting the opportunities to play. Now, again, different scenarios for those three teams in particular. But let them make, why is Zeev Buium allowed to make his mistakes and be so egregiously bad? Why are you so afraid to do that on the offensive side of the puck? Why are we so afraid to let Liam Ohgren try it? Why are we burying Danila Yurov down at the bottom and not seeing what else he can do? I mean, it's a very curious, different dynamic. Because even if you look back at Brock Faber too, they allowed Brock Faber to hop in and get a bigger role. And for some reason on the offense in particular, they're so cautious and they'd rather have these old wily vet guys. And it's like, it's not going to get you points. Like, let the young guys get out there, make the mistakes, see what they can do. And then at least I can see with my own two eyeballs that you were right. Liam Ohgren isn't an NHL player or, what have you. Or Hunter Haight deserves to be in Iowa for another year. Like, I haven't seen it enough either side to make that claim. So it seems really silly and redundant to not have the belief and give those guys that opportunity.
Yeah, and it runs us into the argument of like, well, they haven't done anything with what they have been given at the NHL level. It's like, what are you supposed to do with 8 minutes?
Right.
8 minutes a night.
With Trennan on your wing and, you're not putting them in a position to succeed. Again, you've put Buium in a position to succeed. And there have been, and I know Wild fans hate hearing this, he has been far from perfect. There are some massive turnovers. On the defensive side of the puck, I think Zeev Buium really struggles. Offensively, incredible talent, and it's there. And I'm not at all suggesting bench him or move him or send him. Could you imagine sending him to Iowa because he's made these mistakes, right? Like, it's the same storyline. You're just allowing your blinders on for some reason for the defensive players. And again, because Zeev has shown enough good, but he's been given the opportunity to do so. So do the same with the Haights and the Ohgrens and any other offensive prospects, because it's just they're not getting their time to shine.
Yeah, set the players up, put them in positions to be able to help you out, as opposed to pulling Danila Yurov out of the lineup for a breather, saying we're putting Ben Jones in the lineup to help with faceoffs. Like, trust me, Jessi, I crunched the numbers. There's not a single statistical category in which Ben Jones is better than Danila Yurov, and yet here we are.
It makes no sense. And again, that's not to knock down the Pitlicks and the Joneses, because they have a role in the league, right? Like, they do, and that's fine and well, but it's just they had their chance. They're not the young kids anymore, and that you establish where they were. They've been on different teams. They're rotating and up and down. Like, that's who they are as players. They are never going to be a top six. Yurov could be a top six player, is going to be a top six player in the NHL, right? Ohgren, if he came in and performed, made the mistake, he might be, but like, they still have that opportunity to grow, right? They're not fully bloomed like the Pitlicks and the Joneses. So that's where my frustration is. It's like, we already know what those guys are and what they bring. So why are they still getting the ice time and still getting those chances in the lineup? It just makes no sense.
These are the things that people got upset with Chuck Fletcher for. Just saying.
That's so true, right? Like, and again, I think we've given Bill a long enough leash for the past couple times, and he's made some really great moves. And I think the thing with Bill Guerin is he's a people person, man. Like, he's great. Like, he is a guy that you want to sit down, grab some beers with, and have a good time. But I think that also then again has people putting on their rose-colored glasses. Like, see, he'll do it, because it's like, well, sure, but will he? Yeah. Is he gonna make the moves? They haven't. They still are in the same position they were with Fletcher. They still are in the same position that they've been in with every single general manager aside from the 03-04 era, right? So here we are.
Go ahead, Billy. Make a trade. We dare you. Big thank you to Jessi Pierce for joining the show today. And again, if you have not checked out the Bar Down Beauties podcast or Judd's Hockey Show, make sure to do so over at the Score North family of podcasts. So let's dive into those two big Bill Guerin quotes that Jessi and I discussed. We'll start by taking a look at the potential to make a trade to shake up the roster. That is coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Drip Drop. Folks, when I'm hydrated, everything just seems to work better. My focus, energy, mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's a doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands, using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. As somebody who used to not get enough hydration in my day, The difference is night and day. When you are operating at optimal levels, everything throughout your day seems a little easier, and Drip Drop makes that so tasty too and delicious. They have unbelievably great flavors, so it is something that you are going to be able to easily insert into your morning routine. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com. You promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up right now before the heat hits hard, and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Welcome back to today's edition of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. A reminder, our next live show comes your way at noon on Sunday, and Denny has a full slate of topics to discuss. I can promise you this is going to be a can't-miss edition of Denny's show, so make sure to mark down noon on Sunday on your calendars and join in the conversation. So Bill Guerin had the two kind of eye-opening comments that Jessi and I discussed in segment 1 here today, and I wanted to dive into the first quote before we talk about Marco Rossi's injury situation and how the Wild can fill that void on the roster. Bill Guerin saying that he is not afraid to make a shakeup to this roster. Well, let's look at the circumstances for where this Minnesota Wild team has been at for the last couple of seasons. Financially strapped is one way to put it. Over the last few years, this is the first year that we don't have to discuss heavy cap hits for Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So on one hand, this is the first opportunity that Bill Guerin, in theory, has had to be able to make major impacts and upgrades to this roster. It is a moving target depending entirely on how healthy the Minnesota Wild are between now and the trade deadline. But if the Minnesota Wild, and we know now that this number will change based on putting Marco Rossi on injured reserve, the Minnesota Wild, as of right now, are projected to have $16.7 million available at the trade deadline as far as salary cap space goes. How do we get to that number, considering the fact that the Wild have $4.5 million in current cap space? How do you get from 4.5 to 16.7? Great question. Well, the way that it works is that the salary cap is accrued on a daily basis. And you can, in theory, then bank salary cap if you have a healthy roster, which the Wild so far this year have been relatively healthy, but not fully healthy. Now with Marco Rossi going on injured reserve, that is going to bring that number down. But this will be the most that the Wild have had for at least the last probably 4 or 5 seasons. And it gives them an opportunity to actually do something about it. So I'm not worried about that. And the Wild have most of their current assets, with the exception of their second-round pick this year and their second-round pick next year. They have a farm system full of players that would be intriguing to other teams if they were looking to make some sort of an impact trade. So there are options available for the Minnesota Wild to take a look at as far as making a splash goes. My question is that something that Bill Guerin wants to do? Think about over the last couple of seasons, one of the biggest moves that we have seen from the Minnesota Wild as far as moving a player out. Since the Kevin Fiala trade, the biggest move that we have seen the Minnesota Wild make as far as sending a player out was sending Freddie Gaudreau to the Seattle Kraken. There has just not been a ton in the way of player movement off the roster. And any of the players that have been moved off the roster have been lower in the lineup than, some of these core guys that we think about with this team. Declan Chisholm was traded to the Washington Capitals in June before he was set to become, before the Wild had to worry about signing him to an extension. So that was a player that was sent out. Beyond that, Freddie Gaudreau was sent out back in June. Marat Huznadinov and Jakub Lauko were traded to the Boston Bruins in exchange for Justin Brazeau as a way to kind of shake up the bottom six. Beyond that, though, none of these are major moves in moving players around. Connor Dewar, probably the last big one, and that was back in March of 2024. Bill Guerin just has not made a ton of moves as far as shaking this group up go. And Bill Guerin said in the offseason, the prices are high for current free agents. So he didn't get involved a ton in free agency because the prices were high. Also said in the offseason that the trade market prices are high as well. So that prevented the Minnesota Wild from getting involved in a ton in the way of the trade market, even though the Wild had Marco Rossi on the trade block in the offseason and did not get anything that would have warranted them moving on from him. So it's, we're hearing a little bit of both sides from Bill Guerin on this issue. And we know, because he has said so basically every season, that the Minnesota Wild have not advanced in the playoffs. He has a large level of belief in this team, and belief in this team being able to do what needs to be done and to actually advance in the playoffs, to win a round. He maintains that he has belief in this team to be able to do all of those things, which is why we have seen the likes of players like Ryan Hartman, like Marcus Foligno, like Marcus Johansson, like Yakov Trenyan, like Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Joel Eriksson Ek, have all stayed, despite many of them being pieces of the early core that Bill Guerin had when he first took over. Like these guys have been around for a long time. And if you look at the 2015 to now run of playoff futility, Jared Spurgeon was part of that. Jonas Brodin was part of that. Joel Eriksson Ek was just starting to kind of get his career going as a young player at the beginning of that grouping. So I just need to see Bill Guerin actually kind of put his money where his mouth is, because until proven otherwise, I'm of the belief that any sort of a trade that is made is going to be something that impacts the middle six, the bottom six, and leads to a young player being shipped out to fill a current NHL roster spot. And as you look at the way that this roster is currently put together, is a bottom six or middle six player going to really help you out that much? Your current middle six is Marcus Johansson, Joel Eriksson Ek, Matt Boldy, Vladimir Tarasenko, Danila Yurov, and Hynes with Marcus Foligno, Yakov Trenyan, and Ben Jones on the bottom line. If you throw a player into that mix, yeah, sure, you're going to take Ben Jones or Vinny Hinostroza's spot, but are they going to give you more consistent or more noticeable production than those two players? Than Ben Jones in particular? I hate to keep harping on this, but Ben Jones is working on a string of 34 straight games without a point to start his NHL career. Is whoever you bring in is their production going to greatly outpace that? Which leads me to, I think if you made a top 6 edition, you'd have a better chance for the production to be noticeable. Is kind of my crux of my argument here. Is if you go get another bottom 6 guy, are they going to outpace the current bottom 6, or is their production going to blend in and just be kind of adding to that collection of players? If you get a top 6 guy, their production is probably going to stand out. So if Bill Guerin says he's not afraid to make a shakeup to this roster, like Jessi and I said, go ahead. We dare you. Go do something to kind of jolt this team in. This team as currently constructed, if they make the playoffs, they feel like a team that needs a lot of things to go right their way and a few things to go wrong on the other side in order to win a round. Like, you got to be fully healthy for one, which is not a high percentage occurrence, and you got to have a couple of things go wrong for the other side. Making a swing would certainly impact that and would certainly give you better odds. But there's another part to this, another quote that really stood out to me as far as Bill Guerin goes, in saying that he doesn't really know what the Wild have as far as their young players go. Well, now an opportunity has presented itself for the Minnesota Wild to try to answer that question. We'll talk about Marco Rossi's injury situation and how the Wild could look to fill his spot in the lineup. That is coming up as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. FanDuel simplifies the entire process. They put everything you need in one place, a one-stop shop, if you will, whether it be parlays, futures bets, live bets during games. You can access all of it while watching your favorite team in action. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Again, join us at noon for Denny's latest edition of the live show and trade proposals, trade possibilities. It's going to be one that you do not want to miss. So mark it down for noon and make sure to join us right here on YouTube. So Bill Guerin, the other quote that we kind of dug into a little bit is, we don't really know what we have as far as the prospects go. We don't know if we've got, high-end guys. We just haven't seen a ton of them. Could have another Duncan Keith down there. He played 2 full years at the AHL, and look how he turned out. We don't really know what we have. Well, now would be a real opportune time to try to get to the bottom of that very question, because just today, Marco Rossi was put on injured reserve, and according to the Wild, he is week to week with a lower body injury, which is a big blow to the Minnesota Wild at this current moment. Rossi was one of, if not your best center, playing top-line minutes with Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello, taking a ton of, doing a ton of top-line things. And if you wondered where the production had gone recently, now we know. Injury that Rossi had been dealing with, as the Wild said, for quite some time. And finally got to the point that he needed to be taken out of the lineup. So what happens now that Marco Rossi is out? Who fills that spot? Who fills that slot? How do you replace Marco Rossi's production as a take it to the bank 20-plus goal scorer when healthy on the lineup? Well, as Bill Guerin said, we don't really know what we have as far as young players go. Seems to me that this maybe would be a pretty good opportunity to try to elevate one Danila Yurov higher in the lineup to maybe see what he's got, see if his offense can take a little bit of a leap playing with more offensively inclined players. Not according to John Hynes. Danila Yurov in the latest line rushes from today was centering the third line with Vinny Hinostroza and Vladimir Tarasenko. Ryan Hartman hopped up to the top line, centering Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello. Hynes hoping to replicate some of the magic that team had, that line had in 2021, 2022. And look, I'm not surprised that Hartman gets the first crack to try to fill that spot. He was one of the better players to start the season for the Minnesota Wild, and he kind of has gone cold a little bit. So in putting him up in that spot, the hope is that that'll jog his offense a little bit and try to kind of help get him going. But what we've seen from Ryan Hartman throughout his career is if his offense isn't humming in particular, that's when some of that frustration starts to set in and starts to lead to some of the penalties and the frustrations that lead to him kind of parading to the penalty box on a frequent basis. And if, let's just say, that combination doesn't capture the magic quite like they used to, I would hope that one of the possibilities is that you bump Joel Eriksson Ek up to top center and maybe you give Danila Yurov a shot. This is the frustrating part. This is the frustrating part about this entire battle between play the kids and the kids aren't ready. Is the Wild have almost to the letter tried to fit young players into particular roles, most notably on the fourth line. I know Liam Ohgren has gotten a couple of looks on the second line, but then you look at the end of the game and he's played like 10 minutes. And it was Liam Ohgren. It was Danila Yurov. It was Adam Beckman. It was any other combination of names that we can think of. Sammy Walker. All players that were kind of pigeonholed into a fourth line role, and then people were surprised that they didn't produce when they were on a line with similar fourth line players that were not very offensively inclined at all. Like, it just, some of the roster construction stuff is what leads to me being the most frustrated. Is you have a guy in Danila Yurov who both Bill Guerin and John Hynes went out of their way to say he's playing really well. His defense is tracked. He's been doing a great job defensively. And we feel like the offense is kind of starting to come around a little bit as well. He's got a couple of goals on the season. And then you pull him out of the lineup for, as John Hynes said, we're going to give him a breather. And we're putting Ben Jones in the lineup because we want an opportunity to win some more faceoffs. Are you really helping yourself out if Ben Jones takes 2 faceoffs in a game and offers you, on the season, Ben Jones' expected goals are 0.08. 0.08 goals is the offensive output that Ben Jones has generated so far in the season. That's not a lot. That's hardly any at all. And defensively, on and on and on. Like, it just, you pretty much know what you have there, which goes right back to the theme that we see so often with these young players is you are being played in certain situations, and then veterans who don't maybe give you as much but are, I guess, known commodities end up getting most of the playing time. And I know until this point, Ben Jones had gone back to the bench, and ironic that Danila Yurov scored a goal in his immediate return to the lineup. So a baby step in the right direction to get Danila Yurov up to the third line, but it's going to be very interesting to see how he performs with his line mates, who I think are in similar positions to what we saw with Marcus Foligno and Yakov Trenyan. And if Yurov struggles to produce with those two, then are we going to see Hynes try to move him with more offensively inclined players, or are we going to see him move Ben Jones up? Like, you see kind of where I'm going with this is you are presented with a couple of different options in these situations. Okay, such and such player isn't producing. What if we put them with more offensively inclined players? And guess what? If you do put Danila Yurov in the top 6, you're probably going to lose some faceoffs. So I'm not even, I guess, that upset that Yurov initially just bumped up one line. But if that Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello combination just doesn't have the same flair that it did previously, well, at some point, you're going to need to try Danila Yurov in one of those spots to see what he has, because we're getting to the situation where a lot of these prospects that get shipped out, what you say outwardly is that you just felt like they needed a change of scenery. What I see that as is they need an opportunity. They need an opportunity to try to break down the door, and they're just not getting that here. And the more that happens, the more frustrated people get, the more frustrated fans get. So we'll have another episode coming up later today, as well as tomorrow, and probably on Sunday too for the games. So that is our show for today. Again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We got you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.